What if the greatest conqueror in history never stopped? Imagine a world where Alexander the Great, at the peak of his power, didn't succumb to fever in Babylon. What if he lived for another 30, maybe even 40 years? This single twist of fate wouldn't just change a few lines in a history book. It would rewrite the entire story of civilization as we know it. In 323 BC, Alexander was just 32 years old. He had conquered the known world, from Greece to India, and he was already planning his next move. His generals stood before him, maps unrolled detailing a grand campaign to conquer the Arabian Peninsula. This was meant to be the first step in a much larger ambition, a full-scale invasion of the West, targeting Carthage, Sicily, and the rising power of Rome. If he had lived, the Arabian campaign would have likely been swift. Alexander's military genius, combined with his seasoned Macedonian army, would have faced little organized resistance. Securing the trade routes of the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf would have poured even more unimaginable wealth into his empire's coffers. The riches of the frankincense and myrrh trade would have funded his next and most audacious conquest. With Arabia subdued, Alexander would turn his gaze westward. Carthage, the great naval power of the Mediterranean, would be his primary target. Unlike his campaign against Persia, this would be a naval war, a new challenge for the master of land battles. But Alexander was nothing if not adaptable. He would have likely used the resources of the Phoenician cities he already controlled. Tyre and Sidon too build a fleet that could rival Carthage, as the war for the Mediterranean would be titanic. Imagine Alexander's phalanxes landing on the shores of North Africa, his siege engines, which had cracked the supposedly impregnable walls of Tyre, now aimed at the mighty city of Carthage. It's hard to bet against Alexander. A victory here would give him complete control over the Western Mediterranean's trade and resources. And what about Rome? At this time, the Roman Republic was a regional power on the Italian peninsula, still centuries away from its imperial glory. It was strong, disciplined, and ambitious, but it had never faced a military mind like Alexander's, nor an army as experienced as his veterans. A clash would have been inevitable. Could the Roman legions, in their early form, have stood against the Macedonian phalanx and the heavy cavalry charge of the companions? It's highly unlikely. Rome would have likely been conquered or forced into vassalage, becoming another province in a vast, world-spanning Hellenistic empire. So, let's picture this world. An empire stretching from the Strait of Gibraltar to the Indus River, a single, unified realm under one ruler. Greek would become the undisputed language of administration, commerce, and culture across 3 continents. The fusion of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and now Roman and Carthaginian cultures would have accelerated, creating a truly globalized civilization 2,000 years before our time. What would this mean for science and philosophy? Alexander was a student of Aristotle. He founded cities and libraries wherever he went, most famously Alexandria in Egypt. With an even larger and richer empire, this project would have been magnified 100-fold. Imagine dozens of Alexandrias, from Spain to India, becoming centers of learning, the scientific knowledge of the ancient world, from Babylonian astronomy to Greek mathematics and Roman engineering would have been collected, synthesized, and expanded upon. Could this have led to an early industrial revolution? It's a tantalizing thought. The concentration of wealth, knowledge, and stability under a single empire could have created the conditions for technological breakthroughs that, in our timeline, took nearly 2 millennia to occur. The steam engine, invented in rudimentary form by Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century AD, might have been developed and utilized far earlier. But there's a flip side to this utopian vision of a unified world. Alexander's empire was held together by the force of his personality. What happens after he finally dies of old age? He would have had decades to establish a clear line of succession, perhaps grooming a son or a chosen heir to rule. This could have prevented the chaotic wars of the Diadochi that tore his empire apart in our timeline. However, an empire of that size would be incredibly difficult to govern. Rebellions would be constant. Local cultures and traditions might resist the imposed Hellenistic culture, leading to centuries of simmering conflict. The very unity Alexander fought to create could have become its greatest weakness. Would his successors have his genius, his charisma, his sheer force of will? Probably not. The empire might have eventually fractured anyway, but into different, larger successor states, perhaps a European Hellenic kingdom, an African Hellenic kingdom, and an Asian Hellenic kingdom. The impact on religion would be profound. The spread of Christianity and later Islam would have occurred in a completely different political and cultural landscape. A dominant, syncretic, Greco-Roman paganism, reinforced by imperial power, might have proven a much tougher environment for these new monotheistic faiths to take root. Or perhaps the unified empire and its network of roads and trade routes would have allowed a new faith to spread even faster, just as it did within the Roman Empire later on. The world's spiritual map would be completely redrawn. Think about the world we live in today. Our laws, languages, and political systems are largely inherited from the Roman Empire. Our alphabet is Latin. The Romance language Hispaniae Italianar, direct descendants. Without the rise of Rome, none of this would exist as we know it. The world would speak Greek, or a derivative of it. Our legal and political philosophies would be based on Greek, not Roman, models. It's an astonishing thought. A single man's life, extended by a few decades, could have completely altered the course of human history. The world would be unrecognizable. We might be more technologically advanced, more culturally unified, or we could be living in the fractured remnants of a failed superempire. The legacy of Alexander the Great is immense as it is, but the legacy he almost created is a mystery that historians and dreamers will ponder forever. What do you think would have happened? Would his empire have ushered in a golden age, or would it have collapsed under its own weight? Let me know your theories in the comments below. What alternate history should we explore next? If you enjoyed this journey into the world that might have been, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more, and share this video with anyone who loves history.
If you love uncovering the truth, don't forget to subscribe. More hidden history is coming every week, only on History Uncovered.